It was an ordinary day when everything turned upside down. In the middle of our peaceful cul-de-sac, a man was holding a gun right up to my wife's face, trembling hands and all. His eyes bulged with that absurd confidence that comes from power without reason. He was standing there in the front yard, pointing his weapon at her for something as trivial as jogging past the community clubhouse without any identification. What he didn't know, what I would have gladly paid to see, was that the woman he was trying to intimidate wasn't just anyone. She wasn't just my wife. She was Sergeant Allison Wright, a highly trained and decorated member of an elite Special Forces unit who had just returned from a covert mission 2 days before. She hadn't even finished unpacking her gear when this idiot decided to pick a fight. And yet there she was, standing calmly in front of this wannabe officer, who, by the way, was holding his gun sideways like something out of a low-budget action movie. It was laughable. I knew she could have taken him down with nothing more than a paperclip and a rubber band, but she was giving him a chance to back off. He didn't take it. That's when the situation got intense. We had chosen to live in Silver Ridge Estates precisely to escape the chaos. Allison wanted peace and quiet. She dreamed of mornings spent in the garden, maybe starting a chicken coop, where she could jog down the streets without being harassed. I, on the other hand, a tech enthusiast with a passion for cybersecurity, just wanted a quiet home, some fiber-optic internet, and a comfy basement to work from. We thought we found the perfect place, a private, family-oriented community just outside the city. The brochures made it seem idyllic, highlighting words like sanctuary, community, and family-friendly. Nowhere did it mention anything about overly enthusiastic security patrols acting out tactical fantasies on golf carts. The first red flag came slowly. At first, I thought it was funny, seeing golf carts lined up outside the clubhouse, all emblazoned with the words, "Neighborhood Watch." One even had flashing lights strapped to the roof. I figured it was some sort of quirky neighborhood thing, maybe for Halloween. But no, it was all too real. They weren't playing around. They actually started ticketing people for walking their dogs without a leash. Allison kept to herself, setting up cameras in the yard as a routine from her military days. It helped her unwind, she said. As for me, I buried myself in work, ignoring the oddities around us. The HOA president, Jean McAllister, was the first to introduce herself. She appeared within the first day, her laminated badge, clipboard, and overly formal demeanor giving off a vibe of someone who had never been questioned. She handed us a thick booklet full of ridiculous rules, like no drying laundry outdoors and a grass height limit of 2.75 inches. And then there was my favorite: residents must not appear intimidating during recreational activities. When I asked what that meant, she just smiled and said, "You'll know it when you see it." That was when I knew we were in for trouble. But Allison, being the master of composure, thanked her politely, as though she wasn't just recently involved in military operations across the globe. Fast forward a week, and it happened. Allison went for her usual morning jog. She laced up her sneakers, threw on her hoodie, and plugged in her earbuds. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer to fix a security breach for a client. Suddenly, I got a motion alert from the security cameras. I checked my phone, expecting to see a delivery. Instead, I saw 2 HOA golf carts parked diagonally across the street, blocking the way. Allison was standing still between them, hands raised slightly, while a man in a tactical vest pointed his gun at her. I rushed outside barefoot. When I reached the scene, I saw 2 other officers standing behind him, looking confused but determined to assert their authority. Allison, on the other hand, stood perfectly calm, staring at the gun pointed at her with a level of focus I knew all too well. Then I saw her right hand move slightly, a tiny gesture, controlled and deliberate. That was her signal to me, a warning. The man, Officer Terry Roberts, as I later found out, was yelling about her suspicious activity and failure to follow HOA rules. He said she was jogging without ID. I couldn't believe it. Who jogs with an ID hanging from their neck like a badge? I took a step forward to intervene, but Allison, with a voice as calm as ever, asked, "Are you actually law enforcement?" Roberts puffed out his chest. "We're HOA officers. That's more authority than city cops." That was the moment. A faint smile appeared on Allison's face, the same one she gave to enemies who didn't realize they'd already lost. She gave him one final chance. "Sir, I respectfully ask that you lower your weapon. For your safety." When he refused, it was over in an instant. One moment the gun was in his hand, the next it was sliding across the asphalt. One more blink, and Roberts was face down on the pavement, Allison having expertly subdued him. No effort, no sweat. The Real police arrived soon after, and Roberts and his cronies began howling about assault. The lead officer, glancing at Allison's real credentials, gave her a respectful nod. "Ma'am, you're free to go." The HOA? Not so much. Jean McAllister arrived about 10 minutes later, looking like she had just been told her favorite pet had run away. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Instead, McAllister declared war on both of us. She had no idea what she was starting. Allison wasn't just a regular civilian. She wasn't some suburban housewife. She was a leader, trained in ways that McAllister couldn't even fathom. The fight wasn't about the HOA anymore, it was about principles. The HOA immediately went into damage control mode. The next meeting was a circus. McAllister, wearing a vest covered in HOA pins and a Bluetooth headset that looked straight out of an airport, stood in front of a whiteboard with ridiculous drawings. She called it an emergency response strategy, a strategy to make her look like a hero. But then the body cam footage surfaced. A teenager had hacked into the HOA officer's device and revealed everything. Allison jogging peacefully, Roberts driving up in his golf cart, pulling a weapon, and Allison disarming him with precision. There was no debate. The room fell silent. Someone in the back muttered, "We should be paying her HOA dues." McAllister fumbled with excuses, but the damage was done. The neighbors started demanding audits, questioning where their dues were going. Why did they need a private militia? Then Allison launched what she called Operation Neighborhood Cleanup, a campaign to expose the HOA's shady dealings. Flyers, door-to-door conversations, and clear, irrefutable evidence. McAllister's tactics? Fines, threats, and more rules. None of it worked. While McAllister flailed, Allison operated with the calm precision of a strategist, quietly dismantling the HOA's hold on the community. The federal audit arrived soon after, prompted by Allison's meticulous work. McAllister's empire crumbled. And as for the HOA? Well, they were no longer in charge. Silver Ridge Estates became peaceful once again. Kids played outside without the threat of arbitrary rules, and Allison, she still jogs every morning, free from any clipboard-wielding patrols. As for Jean McAllister? Last I heard, she was trying to sell time shares in the desert. Because when you mess with a real hero, you don't just lose, you get disarmed, politely, by someone who's been through hell and back. In the end, what happened in Silver Ridge Estates wasn't just about one rogue HOA president and a few misguided security officers. It was about power, how easily it can corrupt those who wield it without accountability, and how sometimes the very people you least expect are the ones who will stand up and make things right. When Jean McAllister declared war on Allison and me, she had no idea who she was messing with. In her eyes, we were just a couple of suburbanites who didn't fit into her little kingdom. She underestimated the kind of person Allison was, a woman who had faced life-or-death situations, who had led soldiers through hostile territories, who had negotiated peace in places where violence ruled. The tactical fantasy McAllister had created for herself was no match for the reality that Allison lived every day. What started as a simple misunderstanding over jogging without an ID turned into a battle for justice, and it was a battle Allison was more than ready to fight. What stood out most, though, wasn't just the physical confrontation that unfolded in the street. It wasn't the swift way Allison neutralized Officer Roberts and his crew. No, what struck me deeper was the way the community rallied around the truth. It took the shock of the body cam footage for people to see the abuse of power for what it was, and once they saw it, they couldn't unsee it. The momentum shifted quickly, and suddenly, McAllister's empire, built on fear and control, began to crumble under the weight of undeniable facts. People began asking questions they'd never thought to ask before. Where were their dues going? Why was the HOA acting like a private militia? How had it all gone so wrong? Allison didn't need to yell. She didn't need to engage in petty revenge. She just needed to expose the truth. She launched Operation Neighborhood Cleanup, and it was simple yet brilliant. Instead of getting bogged down in the drama, she focused on the facts, the spending discrepancies, the absurd bylaws, the real motives behind McAllister's rule. She went door to door, not with anger or accusations, but with evidence. And when people saw what was happening, they couldn't help but act. The community began to unite, and it became clear that McAllister's reign of terror was nearing its end. But perhaps the most satisfying part of it all was watching McAllister's reaction. She was desperate. She tried everything she could think of, threatening fines, changing the bylaws on a whim, even trying to paint herself as the victim. But none of it worked because the truth was on our side. McAllister's own lack of genuine leadership was exposed for all to see. She was a woman in over her head, trying to control people with fear instead of trust and respect. The federal audit was the final blow to McAllister's empire, built on fear and manipulation. It collapsed within days. Silver Ridge Estates became the peaceful place we had always dreamed of. Kids played freely, neighbors connected, and Allison could jog without fear of patrols. McAllister, now irrelevant, was last seen trying to sell time shares in the Arizona desert, far from the power she once held. She was exposed for what she was, a leader of fear, not truth. Silver Ridge Estates is peaceful again, a reminder that true power comes from integrity, courage, and standing up when it matters most.